The biodome's atmospheric processors hummed their eternal song as Anna crouched beside the enclosure, her fingers working quickly to secure the tiny fabricated cap onto the bear cub's head. The material, a polymer blend designed to withstand the harsh Martian surface conditions, sat awkwardly between the creature's rounded ears, held in place by an elastic band she'd synthesized from recycled suit components. "There," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the environmental systems. "Now you look official." The cub, one of 3 Ursus arctos specimens born 6 months into the terraforming expedition, shook its head vigorously. The hat stayed put. Anna smiled, a rare expression on the research station where smiles had become as scarce as Earth's blue skies in her memory. She'd been on Mars for 18 standard months, managing the genetics laboratory that would determine whether Earth's fauna could adapt to humanity's new home. The second cub wandered over, curious about its sibling's new accessory. Anna had another hat ready, this one slightly larger, with a small insignia she'd etched into the polymer. 3 stars arranged in a triangle, mimicking the constellation Delphinus that had guided ancient sailors on Earth's oceans. Here on Mars, such navigational poetry seemed absurd, yet Anna found comfort in the symbolism. Dr. Volkov to Dr. Chen. The comm system crackled to life, breaking her concentration. Lewis's voice carried the usual mixture of exhaustion and barely suppressed anxiety that had become standard among the crew. "We have a situation in command. Your presence is requested." Anna secured the second hat and stood, her knees protesting after 40 minutes in a crouch. At 34, she shouldn't feel this old, but Mars had a way of aging people prematurely. The lower gravity did strange things to bone density, and the recycled air, despite the best filtration systems 22nd century engineering could provide, carried a metallic taste that reminded everyone they were living in an artificial bubble on a dead world. "On my way," she responded, casting one last glance at the cubs. The third one had discovered the hats were removable and was currently engaged in a wrestling match with its decorated siblings. Anna allowed herself another smile before sealing the lab. The corridor between genetics and command stretched for 200 meters, its walls lined with hydroponic gardens that provided supplemental oxygen and boosted crew morale. Anna had helped design the integration, arguing that psychological well-being was as crucial as atmospheric composition. Captain Morrison had agreed, though Anna suspected it was less about crew welfare and more about maximizing resource efficiency. Lewis met her at the command entrance. His face, usually composed in that careful way military personnel cultivated, showed cracks of genuine concern. At 41, Louis Chen had served on 3 deep space missions before Mars, his expertise in exobiology making him invaluable to the terraforming effort. His dark eyes, however, suggested he'd seen too much of the universe's indifference to human ambition. "What's happened?" Anna asked, noting the unusual number of personnel gathered around the primary display terminal. "The reconnaissance drones found something," Lewis said quietly, guiding her toward the screen. 17 kilometers northwest, in the Noctis labyrinthus region, the AI flagged it as a Priority 1 anomaly. The display showed a 3-dimensional reconstruction of a canyon system, the resolution sharp enough to reveal individual rock formations. But among the natural Martian geology, something stood out. A structure, clearly artificial, its lines too precise to be erosion or volcanic activity. "Is that," Anna began. "We don't know what it is," Captain Morrison interrupted, her Irish accent thick despite decades in space. The captain was a woman who commanded through presence rather than volume, her 53 years evident in the silver threading through her red hair but not in her steel-sharp focus. "But it's definitely not ours, and given we're supposed to be the first human presence in this region, that presents a significant problem." Anna studied the structure. It was approximately 15 meters in height, composed of what appeared to be interlocking hexagonal segments. The surfaces reflected the thin Martian sunlight in a way that suggested metal, though the spectral analysis data scrolling beside the image indicated something far more complex. Could it be from the Chinese expedition? Someone asked from the back of the room. Morrison shook her head. They're working the Hellas Basin, 3,000 kilometers south, and their mission parameters wouldn't include construction in Noctis. No, this is something else entirely. Lewis pulled up additional drone footage, and Anna felt her breath catch. Around the base of the structure, arranged in a precise circular pattern, were smaller objects. At first, she thought they were rocks, but as the resolution enhanced, she recognized them. 12 distinct formations, each topped with what looked unmistakably like markers or flags. They look like cairns, Anna said softly. Ancient humans used to build them for navigation, for marking territory. Or graves, Lewis added, his voice grim. Morrison turned to face the assembled crew, her expression unreadable. I'm organizing an expedition team. We leave at first light, such as it is on this rust bucket of a planet. Dr. Volkov, Dr. Chen, you're both essential personnel. I need genetics and exobiology perspectives on whatever we find. Anna nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. Mars was supposed to be dead, had been dead for billions of years. The planet's core had cooled, its magnetic field had collapsed, and its atmosphere had been stripped away by solar wind. Nothing survived here. Nothing should have survived here. Captain, Anna said carefully, if there's any possibility of extant life, we need to follow contamination protocols. Full isolation procedures, decontamination. Already planned, Morrison assured her. We're not taking any chances. Whatever built that structure, I want to make damn sure we don't upset it before we understand what we're dealing with. The briefing continued for another hour, covering logistics, safety protocols, and contingency plans. Anna listened with half her attention while the other half kept returning to those small markers around the structure's base. Something about their arrangement troubled her, though she couldn't articulate why. When the meeting finally dispersed, Lewis caught her arm. "Walk with me," he asked. They headed toward the observation dome, a luxury the station designers had insisted upon despite protests about resource allocation. The transparent aluminum hemisphere offered an unobstructed view of the Martian landscape, currently bathed in the orange-pink glow of late afternoon. "You're thinking about the Cubs," Lewis said. It wasn't a question. Anna smiled ruefully. "Am I that transparent?" "Only to someone who knows you." Lewis had been her friend for the entire mission, their relationship built on shared late-night shifts and mutual appreciation for the absurdity of their situation. "What about them?" "The hats," Anna admitted. "I made them little hats this morning just for fun, something to break the monotony, but looking at those markers around the structure." She trailed off, the connection she was making seeming absurd even to her. Lewis waited, patient as always. "What if we're misinterpreting what we're seeing?" Anna continued. "What if those aren't markers in the sense we think? What if they're, I don't know, ornamental, decorative?" "You think aliens came to Mars to make art?" Lewis's skepticism was gentle. "I think intelligence expresses itself in ways we might not immediately recognize as intelligent," Anna countered. "Look at Earth's history. We've found Neanderthal burials with flowers, ancient human sites with carved figures that served no practical purpose. Decoration, ornamentation, play, these aren't frivolous activities. They're markers of cognition, of culture." Lewis considered this, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the sun was setting, turning the sky into a gradient of impossible colors. "So you think whoever built that structure was having fun?" "Maybe, or maybe they were doing something equally incomprehensible to us. The point is, we can't assume their motivations map onto ours." Anna paused, then added quietly, "When I put those hats on the Cubs, I wasn't thinking about hierarchy or command structures. I was just trying to bring a moment of lightness to this place. But if someone analyzed my behavior without understanding the context..." They might think you were establishing a military structure among genetically modified bears, Lewis finished, a hint of amusement in his voice. Fair enough. Though I should mention that Captain Morrison did ask me about the cubs earlier. She saw them on the security feeds and wanted to know if the headgear served a research purpose. Anna felt heat rise to her cheeks. What did you tell her? That you were testing materials for cold weather gear adaptation, which, technically, isn't entirely untrue. Lewis. Relax. She knows you weren't running unauthorized experiments, but she did make a note in her log about Dr. Volkov's unconventional approach to specimen morale assessment. Lewis's expression turned more serious. She's not wrong to be cautious, Anna. Everything we do here gets scrutinized, especially now with this discovery. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the temperature readout on Anna's wrist display began its nightly plunge. In 8 hours, it would drop to minus 70 degrees Celsius. The biodome's heating systems would compensate, but Anna had learned to dress in layers anyway. Mars was unforgiving of assumptions. They stood in silence for a while, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Earth was visible, a blue-white point of light that seemed impossibly distant. Anna thought about the 3 billion people living on that shrinking dot, about the desperation that had driven humanity to Mars, to this grand experiment in planetary resurrection. Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake? She asked quietly. Lewis didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried a weight that suggested he'd asked himself the same question many times. Every day. But then I remember what we left behind. The climate collapse, the resource wars, the pandemic aftermath. Mars might be dead, but it's not dying. There's a difference. Is there, or are we just bringing our dying with us? That's dark even for you. Anna managed a weak laugh. Sorry, too many hours in the lab, I think. The isolation gets to me sometimes. Then it's good you have the cubs, Lewis said gently, even if you're decorating them like tiny generals. The next morning arrived with the artificial dawn. The station's system simulated to maintain circadian rhythms. Anna prepared for the expedition with meticulous care, double-checking her suit seals and loading her sample collection kit with every tool she might need. The geology team had provided preliminary analysis of the structure's composition, a silicon-titanium matrix unlike anything in Earth's or Mars's natural mineralogy, but answers would only come from direct examination. The expedition team consisted of 8 personnel, Captain Morrison commanding, Lewis and Anna for scientific assessment, 2 geologists, a structural engineer, and 2 security officers whose presence made Anna uneasy. What did Morrison expect them to find that required armed guards? The rover journey took 3 hours across terrain that ranged from relatively smooth plains to boulder fields that tested the vehicle's suspension to its limits. Anna spent the time reviewing xenobiology protocols on her tablet, though she knew the material by heart. It was nervous energy seeking an outlet. Lewis sat beside her, equally quiet. Finally, he leaned close and whispered, "Stop catastrophizing. We're probably looking at some abandoned probe from a mission nobody remembered to log. A 15-meter hexagonal probe with decorative cairns. Stranger things have happened." Name one. Lewis considered. Fair point. The structure emerged from the morning haze like a monument to impossible geometry. Up close, it was even more striking than the drone footage had suggested. The hexagonal segments interlocked with such precision that Anna couldn't see where one ended and another began. The surface wasn't merely reflective. It seemed to shift colors based on viewing angle, cycling through a spectrum that included shades Anna didn't have names for. "My God," one of the geologists breathed, "it's beautiful." Morrison's voice cut through the calm channel. "Remember protocols. Nobody touches anything until we've completed full scans. Dr. Chen, I want atmospheric readings. Dr. Volkov, check for any biological signatures." Anna deployed her instruments, watching as the sensors painted a picture of the immediate environment. The atmospheric composition matched baseline Martian values: 95% carbon dioxide, trace nitrogen, argon, and other gases. No oxygen, no methane spikes that might indicate biological activity. The temperature hovered at -40°C, warmed slightly by the morning sun. But when she activated the biological scanner, Anna froze. "Captain," she said carefully, "I'm detecting organic compounds, complex organic compounds, carbon chains that shouldn't exist in this environment." Lewis looked up from his own instruments. "Confirmed. I'm seeing the same thing, but the signatures are old, Anna, very old. These compounds have been here for hundreds of thousands of years minimum." Morrison approached the structure, her movements cautious. Could they have drifted here? Interstellar dust, perhaps. "Not in these concentrations," Anna replied, "and not arranged in these patterns. Captain, I think these might be biological remains." The implications settled over the team like Martian dust. If Anna was right, they weren't just looking at evidence of extinct alien life. They were looking at a tomb. Morrison studied the 12 markers surrounding the structure's base. Now that they were closer, Anna could see that each one was indeed carved with symbols, not writing, exactly, but abstract patterns that suggested intentionality. And topping each marker was a small object that, despite its alien origin, reminded Anna irresistibly of the hats she'd made for the Cubs. "Dr. Volkov," Morrison said slowly, "in your professional opinion, what are we looking at?" Anna approached the nearest marker, her instruments recording every detail. The organic residue was concentrated here in the markers themselves. Whatever they commemorated, it had been biological, and the objects on top. "I think," Anna said carefully, "that someone came here, someone who understood ceremony, who understood the importance of marking significant events or individuals. These markers, they're memorials, and the objects on top might be." She hesitated, aware of how absurd this would sound. "They might be decorative, ornamental, a way of showing respect or affection." "Little hats for the dead," Lewis murmured. "My God, Anna, you might be right." Morrison's expression was unreadable. "Expand on that theory, Doctor." Anna gathered her thoughts, trying to articulate something that existed more as intuition than evidence. "On Earth, we've found that funerary practices often include personal items, decorations, things that mark the deceased as individuals. What if these beings, whoever they were, had a similar tradition? What if these caps or crowns or whatever they are were how they honored their dead?" One of the geologists spoke up. "But the structure itself, what's its purpose?" "A crypt, maybe," Lewis suggested. "Or a monument. Some cultures build elaborate structures to house remains. Others use them as markers visible from great distances." Morrison activated her comm to the base station. "Command, this is Expedition 1. We're going to need an expanded team. Archaeologists, anthropologists, anyone with expertise in funerary architecture, and someone from legal. We need to determine our obligations under the Outer Space Treaty protocols for alien artifacts." While Morrison coordinated with base, Anna continued her examination of the markers. The organic compounds were definitely biological in origin, but degraded beyond the point where she could determine their original nature. Carbon-based, certainly. DNA or something analogous. Impossible to tell without better equipment. Lewis joined her, his scanner humming. "I'm getting readings from inside the structure. There's a hollow chamber, maybe 10 meters across. The walls are showing electromagnetic anomalies, could be power sources, though if so, they're like nothing we've designed." "Should we try to open it?" Anna asked. "Absolutely not," Morrison said, having finished her transmission. "Not until we understand what we're dealing with. For all we know, this could be a warning marker, a quarantine site. I'm not risking this expedition or the base on curiosity." Anna understood the caution, but part of her, the part that had become a scientist because she needed to know, to understand, chafed at the restriction. They were standing before perhaps the most significant discovery in human history, and they were being told to wait. The expedition spent another 4 hours conducting non-invasive scans, collecting atmospheric samples, and documenting everything from multiple angles. The sun climbed higher, warming the structure's surface to a balmy -20°C. Anna noticed that as the temperature rose, the colors shifting across the hexagonal segments became more pronounced, cycling faster through their impossible spectrum. "It's responding to heat," she observed to Lewis. "Or maybe light, could be photosensitive materials." "Or it could be waking up," Lewis said darkly. But nothing dramatic occurred. The structure remained inert, beautiful, and profoundly mysterious. As the expedition prepared to return to base, Anna took one last look at the 12 markers with their crowned tops. "Who were you?" she whispered, "and why did you come here?" The markers offered no answer, standing silent guard over secrets that predated human civilization by epochs. Back at the base, Anna couldn't settle. She'd filed her initial reports, attended the mandatory debriefing, and endured Captain Morrison's stern lecture about maintaining objectivity and avoiding speculation. But her mind kept returning to the structure, to those markers, to the profound loneliness they represented. She found herself back in the genetics lab, sitting beside the bare enclosure. The cubs had grown noticeably in the weeks she'd been monitoring them, their coats thickening as their modified genes activated cold weather adaptations. The little hats she'd made were still there, now somewhat worse for wear from constant cub wrestling. "Dr. Volkov." Anna turned to find Morrison standing in the lab entrance, her expression softer than it had been during the debriefing. "Captain, I didn't expect." "May I join you?" Morrison asked. Anna gestured to the bench beside her. Morrison sat, her eyes fixed on the cubs as they tumbled over each other, their decorated heads bobbing comically. "I owe you an apology," Morrison said quietly. "During the briefing I was harsh, but you were right to draw connections between seemingly unrelated behaviors. That's what good science requires." Anna didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. Morrison continued, "I reviewed your personnel file. Before Mars, you published extensively on animal cognition and social behaviors. Your work on Corvid intelligence won awards. So when I saw these cubs wearing hats, I should have recognized it as research, not whimsy." "It was whimsy," Anna admitted. "At least mostly, but maybe whimsy is a form of research. Maybe play is how we understand things we can't quite articulate yet." Morrison smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her usually stern features. "Lewis said you'd say something like that. He also said you have the best intuitive grasp of non-human cognition on the team." "Lewis talks too much." "Lewis," Morrison said, "is usually right, which is why I'm assigning you as lead investigator on the structure project. You and Dr. Chen will coordinate all scientific analysis. I want that intuition of yours focused on understanding who built that monument and why." Anna felt excitement and terror in equal measure. "Captain, I'm not qualified for." "You're the most qualified person we have. You understand that intelligence manifests in unexpected ways. You don't try to force alien behavior into human frameworks." Morrison stood, preparing to leave. "Besides, anyone who can make 3 bear cubs accept wearing hats without protest clearly has skills in interspecies diplomacy we'll need." After Morrison left, Anna sat in silence, watching the cubs play. One of them, the largest, whom she'd privately named Yuri, had finally managed to remove all 3 hats and was sitting on them triumphantly while his siblings protested. Anna laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet lab. Somewhere on Mars, beneath hexagonal segments of impossible geometry, beings had once lived and died. They'd built monuments, marked their dead, perhaps even played and laughed in ways Anna would never fully comprehend. But they'd been here, they'd existed, and in the vast indifference of the universe that mattered. Anna picked up one of the fallen hats, examining it in the lab's artificial light. Such a simple thing, just polymer and elastic, crafted on a whim to bring a moment of joy to a lonely laboratory. But to someone who didn't understand context, who analyzed behavior through alien frameworks, it might seem like something else entirely. A rank insignia, a command structure, a claim of authority. The misunderstanding worked both ways. Humans would bring their own assumptions to the Martian structure, imposing meaning where different meanings existed. But that was the work ahead, learning to see beyond human frameworks, to understand intelligence in its infinite expressions. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, though, Anna sat with 3 bear cubs in their slightly ridiculous hats, surrounded by the hum of life support systems keeping death at bay, and allowed herself to hope. Hope that understanding was possible. That connection could bridge even the vast gulfs between species, between worlds, between the living and the long dead. Hope that in putting little hats on bear cubs, in crowning monuments to alien dead, intelligence, wherever it arose, spoke a common language of care, remembrance, and perhaps even joy. The cubs finally settled down to sleep, their breathing synchronizing into a peaceful rhythm. Anna dimmed the lights and headed toward her quarters, her mind already spinning with research protocols and analysis frameworks. Behind her, 3 small hats lay scattered in the enclosure, monuments to connection both profound and absurd. On Mars, the structure waited in the darkness, its secrets intact, its crown markers standing vigil over mysteries that span millennia. And somewhere in the space between human understanding and alien truth, meaning waited to be discovered, if only someone was willing to see beyond the obvious, to recognize that sometimes the most important communications were the ones that seemed, on the surface, like nothing more than play. And